Good morning. Here's your Intel report for Friday, December 2nd, 2022. Geostrategic Intelligence Summary. Russia NATO Situation Report. Union State deploys troops in response to NATO. The joint Russian-Belarusian military grouping is training for deployment in response to NATO activity. On Thursday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov declared that the US and NATO are direct participants in the Ukraine war. Belarusian Defense Minister Viktor Krenin downplayed the risk of war while also acknowledging the increased militarization of nearby NATO states. Krenin urged his subordinates to focus on defense in response to the Western buildup. Deploying Union state troops could be a defensive measure as stated by Minister Krenin, or it could be a preparation for a northern offensive into Ukraine. Russian MOD, Su-34 on 24-hour sorties. In a press release on Thursday, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that its Su-34 fighter bombers were on 24-hour sorties at home airfields. Most Su-34 squadrons are based in the southern military district, near Ukraine. 24-hour sorties likely mean that Russia has several aircraft always flying over each airbase. Choosing Su-34s for constant sorties indicates that Russia is preparing for rapid responses to airborne and ground-based threats from Ukraine. EU approves price cap on Russian oil. European Union officials have approved a measure to cap the price of Russian oil at $60 per barrel. Documents obtained by Reuters indicate the measure also incorporates an adjustment mechanism to ensure the price remains 5% below the current market price. The price cap would be subject to review and adjustment in mid-January and at 2-month intervals. The EU price cap seeks to forcibly prohibit Western-based insurance and shipping companies from accepting cargoes of Russian crude oil sold at prices higher than the $60 cap. This mechanism ostensibly harms Russia's economy by increasing the level of difficulty for Russia to ship and sell its oil products. However, because the price cap only affects seaborne shipments, the move represents a toothless symbolic anchor as it fails to address pipeline-based deliveries. This will likely drive an expansion of Russian pipeline projects and increase friend-sharing of Russian oil to markets in China and other allied nations. Latin America Situation Report. Cuba thanks Russia for support against US destabilization attempts. During a meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the president of the Cuban National Assembly of People's Power, Esteban Lazo Hernandez, thanked Russia for its condemnation of attempts by American media to destabilize the island nation and provoke a social upheaval. The comments follow earlier remarks by Hernandez during a visit to the Russian Federal Assembly, expressing endless gratitude for the delivery of humanitarian supplies to Cuba as part of Russian efforts to end American trade embargoes. Ongoing Russian and Chinese support of Cuba reflects a larger pattern of attempts by the Eastern Alliance to expand its influence through the delivery of economic, military, and political support to historic Cold War allies marginalized or ignored by the West. Mexican economy expanding. Mexico's manufacturing sector expanded for a third straight month in November as tentative signs point to a recovery in demand conditions, stabilized retail, and employment. The seasonally adjusted S&P Global Mexico Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index MMM equals ECI was 50.6 in November, up from 50.3 in October and above the key 50 threshold that separates growth from contraction. The latest results highlighted hesitant signs of a recovery in demand for Mexican goods, as companies mostly absorbed additional cost burdens and refrained from hiking selling charges where possible to try and boost sales, said Poliana de Lima, Economics Associate Director at S&P Global Market Intelligence. China and Indo-Pacific Situation Report. China relaxes COVID restrictions in bid to stave off protests. Chinese authorities continue to relax COVID restrictions to diffuse public anger over the country's unpopular zero-COVID policies. Police patrols continued in force across the country, although major cities have been quiet, with few reported protests. Guangzhou, Shijiazhuang, and Chengdu all announced they were easing testing requirements and movement restrictions. COVID controls remain in place in other urban areas, but authorities are keeping enforcement and post-protest crackdowns out of sight. China's approach to recovering from the past week's social unrest is to slightly relax rules to convince people that living conditions will improve while simultaneously removing individuals identified as leading or participating in the protests. This tactic was used successfully in Hong Kong during its unpopular reunification with mainland China. India rejects Chinese opposition to joint U.S. drills near disputed border region. Speaking to media, Indian Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arindam Bagchi rejected Chinese objections to ongoing joint military exercises between Indian and U.S. forces near the line of actual control. China's foreign ministry had decried the exercises as a violation of the spirit of agreements signed between India and China in 1993 and 1996, saying the drills failed to help build bilateral trust. Citing China's breaches of the agreements, Bagchi denounced China, saying India would hold exercises with whoever it chooses and does not give a veto to a third country over its military exercises. Inside the Beltway. White House. President Biden is scheduled to travel to Massachusetts, where he will meet Prince William of Wales, participate in an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers event, and attend a reception for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Congress. The House Foreign Affairs Committee is scheduled to hold a closed briefing on Ukraine. Defense. Secretary Austin is scheduled to travel to California, where he will sign a letter of intent with Small Business Administration, SBA, Administrator Guzman, partnering the SBA and the newly established Office of Strategic Capital at the Department of Defense. State. Secretary Blinken is scheduled to meet with Sri Lankan Foreign Minister Ali Sabri at the State Department. Domestic Intelligence Summary. Analyst comment: the Senate passed the resolution to impose the rail contract negotiated by the Biden administration in September. According to rail workers interviewed by FreightWaves, many younger rail employees supported the contract deal to receive back pay with plans to leave the railroad. One underlying cause of the contract dispute has been a worker shortage on the railroads, and younger rail workers leaving will exacerbate the shortage. Prices received by ranchers and growers in October increased, but so did input costs. Shrinking margins in the agricultural industry will have inflationary pressure on food prices going into next year. The Fed is scheduled to meet on December 12 and is expected to raise interest rates. At a Brookings Institute event Wednesday, Powell said that the time for moderating rate increases may come as soon as the December meeting. Senate passes rail deal bill without paid sick leave increase. The resolution to impose a rail deal and avert a strike has passed the Senate 80-15 and now heads to President Biden's desk. An amendment pushed by Senator Sanders, Democrat Vermont, to add an increase in paid sick leave to the Senate bill failed to get enough votes. According to rail employees interviewed by FreightWaves, the sticking point for the deal was paid sick leave and strict attendance policies. USDA, farm prices received up 20%, 2023 agriculture imports to grow. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, prices received by growers and ranchers in October increased by 20% over the same month last year. The USDA Trade Outlook report projected that U.S. farm exports would slow, and agricultural imports would grow in 2023 due to a stronger U.S. dollar. Biden administration plans to boost biofuel quota. Canola approved for use in biodiesel. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, will ask companies to blend 20.82 billion gallons of biofuel in 2023 and increase the biofuel quota to 21.87 and 22.68 billion gallons in 2024 and 2025. The EPA also approved the use of canola oil for use in making biodiesel, and the Energy Information Administration projects biodiesel production capacity to triple by the end of 2023. DOE seeks to halt sales from strategic reserve. Republicans seek information on SPR. The Department of Energy, DOE, is seeking to cancel or delay sales from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, SPR, mandated by Congress for the years 2024 through 2027. According to DOE Deputy Director for the Office of Petroleum Reserves Doug McIntyre, the administration plans to refill the reserve when oil hits $70 per barrel. According to DOE data, the SPR has a capacity of 700 million barrels of oil and is currently at 389 million barrels. Republicans in Congress sent a letter to DOE Secretary Granholm asking the secretary to answer questions about damage to SPR infrastructure due to the Biden administration's release of oil from the reserve. Powell, retirement driving labor participation shortfall, job openings fall. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said the shortfall in labor force participation is mostly due to excess retirements. Powell said the Fed could not rely on a rise in labor supply to moderate wage and price pressures in the near term and instead would need to continue raising rates to slow the economy and bring labor demand down. According to the Department of Labor Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey, job openings decreased from 10.7 to 10.3 million in October. End report.